to Resilience plus Rise, the space where we excavate the extraordinary from the heart of the challenge. I'm your host, Thomas Carrier. If you're feeling the pull towards a deeper purpose, a more impactful legacy, beyond the peaks you have conquered or still conquering, I would say at times just existing through, you're in the right place. Because just like 26.2 transformative miles I explore in my book, life's most significant chapters often begin when we dare to redefine our finish line. And yes, this is available to buy. Today's guest, an amazing personality, Tiffany Connauton. She is a human centered strategist. Tiffany is the founder and the CEO of Beyond Diversity, an organizational cultural consulting firm. But more than that, she's a dedicated advocate for positive change. Tiffany has been channeling her passion into shaping a world where workplaces and volunteer organizations thrive. They don't just exist. When she took on Beyond Diversity, she was fueled by her lived experience, a recovering toxic workplace employee. She's on a mission to reduce harm in companies and build cultures where people feel safe, valued, and energized. She believes and she brings forth empathy, bold leadership, deep system to incite or spark a real lasting change on how business is done. When I speak to Tiffany, it's not about business. Her conversation is about when I talk about my coaching, self management, grow from within. So, anyway, without spending much time, Tiffany, welcome to Resilience plus Rise.
Thank you so much, Thomas. What a, a beautiful introduction. Thank you so much. I'm like, who is that person he's talking about? I really appreciate your kind words. It was a beautiful introduction, and it's always a pleasure when you and I get to chat. So thank you so much.
Thank you. So, Tiffany, without mincing, because this is one of the questions which I usually ask after a while when I get into a conversation with some of the amazing guests I have been having. Our deepest of purpose comes from our deepest of pains, or the shine, taking paraphrasing from Rumi, our light shines the brightest from our deepest of wounds. I would directly come to a point. What made you start Beyond Diversity?
That is, it's a very clear answer for me in that it was definitely a wound that started. So I was diagnosed with PTSD after hitting my kitchen floor. And the way that that happened was very slowly and over time. I've learned a lot about mental health and the effects of what toxic workplaces can do over this journey. And what had happened was on the Tuesday, I was picking my kids up from school, and I had a colleague call me, and she mentioned that she was contemplating suicide. This was a Tuesday afternoon, and it shook me to the core. She ended that call very happy, and it really threw me off. I spent the next 24 hours making sure that there was an intervention and that she was safe, and making sure that she had the support that she needed. But her thoughts around suicide were due to workplace culture. Fast forward to Friday of the same week, I sat down with another colleague of mine who spent 4 hours. We had a beautiful coffee and we just talked. And she spent 4 hours telling me about the abuse and the harassment and the lack of support that she had because the organization had pushed her into a role because she was female and not because that's where she was slated to be. She didn't have any support and she felt really alone. Leaving that meeting on the Friday, I was very, very angry, angrier than I've been ever. I just felt it inside of me and it was disturbing. So I knew something was wrong. So I called my boss and said, hey, it's been a really tough week. I just need a couple of days. And thankfully I had a very supportive boss at the time and they were like, don't worry about it. We'll see you on Wednesday. And over the next couple of days, I could feel physical symptoms of things shifting within me. And Sunday, I came downstairs. I stood in front of the coffee pot as I do every morning. And instead of being able to pick up the coffee pot and pour myself a coffee, I slumped onto my kitchen floor where I stayed for a very long time, unable to think rational thoughts, unable to perform all of the roles in my life that I had, taken on. And um, just this mix of emotions swirling around. And that was the beginning of the journey. And that was the journey where I am still, and likely probably for the rest of my life, will recover from PTSD, severe anxiety and panic disorder. And it all was due to the workplace trauma that I had suffered for the 15 years that I had been with this organization. So um, when I came out of, my recovery enough to be able to show my face back in the world and do great things again, I really doubled down on the business and I said, it's time that we started having real conversations, bold conversations. It's time that we started holding leaders and organizations accountable. It's not okay that we are announcing record profits within companies, yet this is what's happening in people's homes. They're losing so much, and the most impactful thing that they lose is time. I lost a year and just about a year and a half of all of the things in that recovery. And there's nothing in this world that can give me that time back. That's a year and a half of joy, a year and a half of connection, a year and a half of, my life that is irreplaceable. So Beyond Diversity was born in this recovery and in, I would say, the deepest learning I have ever done in my life. I knew going in that it was not okay that people were treated this way, but now that means something completely different.
Amazing, amazing. There are 2 points which comes up in this conversation. What I've just heard is that pain always shows or brings out lessons. And one of my favorite quotes is that if it's not repaired, it gets repeated. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
that goes in the way. But when we talk about this, in fact, just last year, I had embarked on this journey because I was a program manager, project manager, senior, having everything good. But I was still in that space because, as we mentioned, is that the stress, or we are trying to show because of maybe because of the salary that we have got, or maybe of the responsibility we are taken on, or the accountability. I did I went in for a research wherein we talk about work-life balance. And fortunately, prior to that, I had already realized work is just a subset of life. Why do we hold it in the same level of life? We forget. Yes, 8 hours, that is one third of the day, goes in your work. But does that have to be your, for some people, yes, that is their evidence, that is their identity. That's what they believe they're born to do. So be it. but there's also when work overtakes life, and you lose the sense of what you're existing or living for. So when you got into beyond diversity, I know there have been changes which led to this particular thing of beyond diversity. What happened? How was the initial journey about what whether it opened up floodgates, or was it trickle, or people were just still hesitating, or they were still blindsided by saying that no, life is good?
I think it's a combination, to be honest. And I think because it's a human journey. So, one of the greatest blessings of the work that I do is to bring humanity back into business. And I think that that's really, I'm very deeply empathetic. So I can see where the cracks are. But if you look at even my own journey, I
Mhm.
started with that organization, 15 years prior to this break, believing that I had to fit in, believing that I had to mask different parts of me, believing that the way to get through my career was to like really strictly survive instead of being able to thrive in that. And that's because that's how I've been mentored. So if we think about human behavior, it's very, very rarely a light switch. It doesn't turn on or off. So, in the changes that I see within my clientele and within potential clients, there's always this place that they are in the journey. And some of them are further along where they're willing to say, hey, we've got it wrong. And this is what we want to do to fix it. And there's still some that believe that the way that we've been doing it is the way to do it. It wasn't very long ago that I had a conversation with someone who said, oh, this new generation, they actually want to be paid, more for the work that they're doing, and they want to work less. When you talk about work-life balance, a really dear friend of mine, Ali Stone, has mentioned that work-life integration should be what we're actually talking about. And I think that goes to your point where if you love your job, you're going to be doing it more in your life, but it becomes part of your life. So I think that, the short answer to that question is that because human behavior is a journey, everyone is going to be at a different place in that journey. And one of my I'd say most important jobs when meeting clients is to meet them where they're at. So where are they? Instead of telling them like this is where you are and this is where you need to get to, it's working with them initially and doing some upfront work to figure out where they're at. And then what is a comfortable discomfort? We grow when we're in discomfort. So there's always going to be a level of that. But if we take it too far, then people just recede from that and they don't actually do the change. So
True.
there's some really fine lines in there that we have to balance. And it all goes back to humanity.
Wonderful. And when you mentioned about going to a point where they are at, and also the mind, see there, what I've seen is that as a coach, I've seen um, when they are in that space, some of them, they love it, the victim and the martyr attitude, and they refuse to believe that there's anything wrong with it, because that's again becomes their identity.
Yeah.
And for them to break that mold, it takes a, quite a bit of powerful questions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when the change. And when you just mentioned about Ali Stone, even I had the privilege of having her as a guest. Wonderful human, beautiful coach, and loved in fact, the challenges that she has gone through.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So it depends on how you're looking at it and what is happening around. Now, when you have taken embarked on this journey about beyond diversity, what has been your transformation as Tiffany?
Oh, I
Do
love that
you
question.
do you still go to the kitchen table and your hand kind of shivers before going to the coffee, or what happens?
I would say I am brighter and stronger than I have ever been. Um, And I say that because of all of the work that's gone into that internal piece. When we talk a lot about coaching, like in the space that you're in, and in the space that I'm in, oftentimes we can forget that there's a lot of internal work to do. So in my recovery, I had no choice but to do that internal work. There was plenty of tears, there was plenty of anger, and I still have my days. However, one of the biggest lessons that I learned, and I would say the one that creates so much power in my existence today, is that all of the roles that we fill in life are not our identities. So initially, when I hit my kitchen floor, not only did I believe wholeheartedly that I was the only human that was going through this, which made it really important to tell my story, I didn't want others to feel that they were alone. But the second thing that initially hit me with like a ton of bricks was the fact that I was no longer able to be an employee. I was no longer able to be a business owner. I was no longer able to be a board member or a director or a vice chair or a mother or a sister, a spouse, like all of those things I was incapable of doing. And that translated in my head to I am now nobody. I have no value. I have nothing. I have no identity. So, the largest lesson for me was coming out of this knowing that my identity is none of those things. My identity is Tiffany Connauton. That is who I am. That is the power. That is the essence, the light in the world is all my name. Our names are what belong to us. The rest of it is just roles that we play in this world that we're in and in this life, and we can change those roles, but our identity is true to us, and there's only one of me. There'll be plenty of business owners, there'll be plenty of employees, there'll be plenty of mothers, but there is only one Tiffany. So I would say for me, the largest transformation, there was many lessons, and I am different in a lot of ways. However, that one I would say is by far the most powerful and the most transformational for me. Yeah.
That's very profound. And I've always believed in its own ways that the day we consider we are nobody, and if we allow the universe to open to for us to find who we are, that's when the light starts shining from within. The humility, the empathy that comes first and foremost, forget about others, but for our own self, the kindness that we have for our own self, that's when we realize the potentiality that we have. This podcast also, when I started it, it was for as a companion to this particular book. That okay, people are talking about resilience, but the examples I've used in the books are a lot of people with name personalities. But what about you and me? Of course, I've written a few of my stories in that, but what happens to other people and what I have been blessed with so many humans coming up and saying that I was hurt, but I refused. I was hurt, I was pushed, had really gone to the dumps, and that's when I realized I have to rise up. And the profound change, and I believe one of the main elements over here, which has resonated time and again, is that when they reached out, knowing the pain that they are in, to another person who are in the same pain and allowing to uplift. And that's where I came across my terminology, which I say time and again, is that we are all like angels with one wing. When we hold another, that's when we fly higher.
I love that so much, so much. It resonates. We are in this together. We
Yeah,
can't do life alone. It's too messy. It's too hard. It's not meant to be done alone. It's meant to be done together. You know, and that goes for families, for organizations, for teams. Every interaction that we have as human beings is meant to do together. And that might look different for everybody.
everybody, it may look different.
Yeah.
But when we go back to the old cultures, when we listen to uh, the generational, how they used to solve, get the problem solved, coming together. Of course, now when people talk, it becomes more of a gossip or slandering or things like that. Because unfortunately, we are hit by the corporate insignia, which is there that who's having what, and the best way we can make ourselves feel better is making the other person at least talking about them in a low phase, and that's again becomes where the toxic environment comes in.
Absolutely. Yeah. We've lost our sense of community. And I think that, there's lots of reasons for it. I think the complexity of that problem in itself is probably a whole other 3 or 4 part series
Mm,
that we could do. But I mean, when we get down to it, we stopped valuing our community. We stopped valuing each other. And we started really internalizing personal value and accomplishment over collective action and collective accomplishment. And when we did that, that shift happened, we started disconnecting. So now we have a whole bunch of hurt in the world that needs to heal. And that goes again from our leaders to our parents to our teachers. You can see it everywhere you look. This idea that they have to do it themselves, they have to shoulder the world. Um, I would say the second most impactful lesson that I learned going through my recovery was that you can't do it alone. In the first initial months, I did try, to be really honest, Thomas. I didn't want anyone to know what was going on. I
hmm
was ashamed. I was terrified. I was scared. I figured that there was something wrong with me. There were so many messy things that were happening. And it wasn't right away that I got the boldness and the courage. That came over time. And I remember, I didn't tell my mom for 3 or 4 months how bad things were. I hid away from the world. Like I was just, off work. Like I was fine. I had a really hard time even really admitting to myself how bad things were. But the minute that I did, and the minute that I started to tell people, I'm not okay, and this is really bad, and this is some of the things I've been going through, the community that formed around me. When I talk about my recovery, it wasn't just me. There were so many humans that were part of that recovery. Um, Jesse and Melissa, who helped me with the videos that are on my website, 2 of the most impactful humans throughout that time, were so blessed to I was just incredibly supported by community as I started going through it. So, we talk about these stories, and the outcomes are usually quite individual, because I'm a different person,
of course.
but it didn't happen by myself. It wasn't without others. Both my wings in that particular circumstance were broken, and I needed someone to help, and I was lucky to have those people. But for anybody that, is hitting their kitchen floor, for anybody that is contemplating being on their kitchen floor, as a good place to be, just know that the recovery it's not linear, it's not clean, it's messy, and you can't do it alone. Like, you have to find your people.
Wow, that's amazing. Let's talk about beyond diversity. What are the plans going forward? I know that y'all are build up pretty and building up a pretty good solid community. But if people want to know, of course, guys, I'll be putting out Beyond Diversity, the website, and the connection of Tiffany down in the comments below. Do have a look onto it. But going forward, what are the dreams, aspirations? What are something that's gets you up in the morning and say that let's get it done?
Let's get it done. For me, it's impacting the humanity within business, and it's not only doing it within organizations, but also role modeling it. So I do business a little bit differently, which helps me to role model what I'm trying to teach others. And what it is meeting organizations in a place where I can show them that we can build human-centered organizations that are successful. I'm not unrealistic in knowing that capitalism and money and business are required in the society that we have built. We need successful organizations. What I am completely against is the fact that we need successful organizations off of hurting people. So the vision for Beyond Diversity is to partner with as many organizations as we possibly can in creating that humanity within business, to create thriving workplaces where individuals feel that they are seen, that they are heard, that they belong, and companies are recording the success and the profits that they value, because both can coexist. They are not mutually exclusive. We can do this together, and we can do it better. So I think in the short term, that is my goal. In the long term, I want to grow the business and scale so that we can impact more organizations across the world and really, really change how we see each other, and build that kind of business community back into how we thrive in our society.
Wonderful. But is there any major projects that you are taking on this year?
I have two major projects that I've taken on this year, both to help organizations, especially in the messy middle that we're in right now.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of uncertainty in our business world,
Mm-hmm.
and that's caused by a lot of, again, complex issues. But I think for me, it was kind of going a little bit back to basics this year. So I've launched two different programs. One is called Nexus Learning Solutions, and that is customized e-learning um, programs that can be onloaded or uploaded to an organization's own LMS system. So we have a variety of topics. I think we're up to 33, if I'm not mistaken, 33 topics. That's kind of a menu for an organization they can pick from, that they can load into their LMS system, that will help them to get some foundational learning within their organization quite quickly. And they're all packaged prices. So that's the first one. And then the second one that actually just launched last week is Uncharted. And Uncharted is a 4-part experiential learning in-person session that this program is meant to build resilience, which you and I are very, very keen to build resilience within organizations, within teams and leadership. And the way that we do that is we start with some workshops, but they're different because they're experiential. So we're getting up, we're moving, we're feeling some of the lessons as opposed to just hearing about them. You're not going to be talked to for this amount of time. So we do a session on emotional intelligence. We do a session on the cost of bias. And I really kind of show people how they will fail if they don't include their own thought patterns into things, and they don't choose to fail. And then we start talking really deeply about how empathy works and how it impacts our ability to lead within an organization. And I walk the next day, I'll walk the teams through what's called an empathy walk. And
Mm-hmm.
that's a very deep exercise that I do with teams. And then what it ends up happening, the outcome of that is that we see each other differently and we're able to come together a lot stronger. And then we end with an action plan. And this is something that's quite different than what's on the market right now. And that's because we sit down and it's a 2-hour guided, facilitated action plan session where you're able to take all of the learnings that you've gotten over the last 3 sessions and build them into like a 3-month, 6-month action plan that sustains the learning as we go through. We offer our clients to be able to video one of the sessions
Mm-hmm.
so that they can keep it within their organization for that ongoing learning. And there's always add-ons and things that we can customize for companies. But that one we're really excited about because I think that that's the one that's going to get really deep down into that humanity piece, rather than just the workshops and the e-learning where people are being talked at or, talked through a lot of the times. This is they're part of the journey and they're part of the session. So we're quite excited. We're now booking for June and July for those sessions right now. So yeah,
June and July. Okay,
yeah,
fair enough. So, Tiffany, a question which comes up over here, and just being mindful of the time,
yes.
but you can take your time to answer this. You are an inclusion specialist dedicated to transforming organizational cultures into inclusive, and the word you have used is thriving environments. So, as you mentioned, whether they are in the beginning of the journey or ready to deepen the impact, you, as Beyond Diversity, will meet them where they are We'll provide the care, the clarity, and the boldness that is required. But also, you mentioned what's happening, the dynamics which is happening in the world. When there are first world countries wherein they believe, I mean, that's what I read, they don't believe in the DEI. So there is a lot of scare factor. There are people saying that, yeah, you know what, we are humans, we are strong enough, we can do it. And there are leaders, supposedly leaders, they said, my way or the highway. So this question comes to the people, the listeners who are there. What would, I'm not asking the word advice because advices a lot of people can give, but what are the suggestions that you could provide? Maybe if you could think about the top three suggestions you could provide so that they don't hit the kitchen floor in a slump. Because in these particular things, even I've gone through that particular toxic environment. Even I've got scared. But of course, I had my running to go, always to fall back to wherein I could relieve myself. But what are the top three suggestions that you could put across that people could get more resilient, more stronger, and if they still believe they can do something not only for their own self but also to a fellow human?
I love this question, and I think that, you know, we could probably do a whole other session on all the solutions because it's
That's the
very
reason I
individual,
said
right?
you can take your time in replying that because I know it's a loaded question
Yeah, it is.
and please go for it.
I think the very first thing is community. I've said it and I believe wholeheartedly that we can't do this alone. And whatever community means for you, build it, seek it out, and have the courage to ask for help. It's so scary. And I speak from experience, reaching out and telling people that you're not okay or you're struggling is so difficult. But also from experience, I can tell you there's so many people out there that are willing to be there with you. And you'll be very surprised at how many people come when you ask. So I think that for me, the number one thing is build community. That's the very deepest thing that we can do, because we can get through hard things together, but it's very difficult to get through hard things alone. Number two, reality is different based on your perspective.
Beautiful.
So do the internal work on your perspective. Look for things to be grateful for. Pay attention to the messages in the world that are more positive. It really helps in when we're trying to get through that messy stuff. If we can see little light coming through. Thomas, you mentioned something at the top, and I don't know if we were actually recording at the time, but you said the cracks let the light in. And it's 100% what happens when we're broken, when things aren't great. There's still places where the light comes in. Find that light and really work on your perspective. The third thing, I think, for me, um, is to remember who you are. It is so difficult today, especially with all of the messages that we're getting that keep telling us that we're supposed to be something, we're supposed to be this, we're supposed to be that. I can't tell you how many people have told me how to do business in a certain way, and I keep telling them that it's not the way that I'm doing it. Um, Remember who you are and show up in this world as you. It's scary and it's hard, but the power that comes from that, the joy that comes from that, the strength that you get from showing up as yourself, coupled with community, it just cannot be overdone. It's the only thing that will get you through.
Beautiful. Fantastic. So, guys, I'm in a good fortune space that I connected with Tiffany. If you have listened till here, we know the warmth. People call it as empathy, but I call it as the warmth. What is being extruded from Tiffany, the humanness of what, and she has gone through it. If you go through her website, you will know that what she's talking is not just about papers being pushed from one place to another and people were, it goes way more than that. Mental, emotional, sexual abuses that has been taking place. And it is not just so she can understand where you're coming from. Even if it's just to book a discovery call, reach out. They may not have all the answers, but they may know where to direct you towards what could work in your favor so that you become more resilient, you become a little more stronger, not to give up. So Tiffany, with this, I take this honor of saying thank you. It was a privilege and a pleasure just having this conversation. It has been a beautiful conversation. Thank you so very much, and you have a good rest of the day.
Thank you so much, Thomas. I really appreciate you and everything that you do with your podcast and your messaging to the world. It's much needed. Thank you.
Thank you.